Good evening and buenas noches. My name is Liz Fernandez. I am the Job Fair Administrator for the NYSAIS Job Fair to promote diversity. This year it will be held in person at Columbia Grammar and Preparatory School at 4 West 93rd Street from 10 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. on Saturday, March 4th. We are so excited to be back in person, and we look forward to welcoming candidates and schools to connect. If you are watching this webinar live, we are thrilled you're here. If you are viewing this webinar at your own leisure as a recording, please feel free to follow up if you have questions at jobfair@nysais.org. For this evening, we are here to talk about the resume do's and don'ts. And so I am very excited to be able to take you through the do's and don'ts this evening, and hope that this presentation will be helpful to you and will provide you with information. If you have additional questions, as I said, please do email us. So we are going to get started. I am thrilled this evening to have my colleague Andrew join us from NYSAIS. I appreciate being able to partner with Andrew, and I'm going to ask that if at any point there's any difficulty either seeing the screen, that Andrew come off mute and let me know, since I am presenting. I'm not sure what may or may not be happening, and although many of us are very well versed in Zoom, every now and then human error gets in the way. So with that, let's dive in and talk about resumes, because the goal really is for you to be as prepared as possible with the best resume that really illustrates your experience and your skill sets and your capacity to explore employment in any of the schools that will attend the NYSAIS Job Fair, or in any position that you may apply between now, the job fair, and certainly thereafter. So the first thing that's super important as you prepare your resume is please know your audience. What are you applying for? Where is this place? Location-wise, who is it serving? How large is it? What is the mission? What is the pedagogy? What is the philosophy? What kind of school is it? How do they think about teaching and learning? Knowing your audience. It may very well be that you are familiar because you're an alum of an independent school, and that's fantastic. You may not be, and we'll talk about throughout this presentation, and I'll give you concrete examples of ways in which you can highlight parts of your professional experience in resumes, because you're going to see examples of particular points that I've been able to bring to the screen for your understanding of what we mean. If you're like me, I'm a visual learner. It's always helpful to see things illustrated visually. And so because we're talking about knowing your audience, let's talk about who is NYSAIS. NYSAIS is the New York State Association of Independent Schools, and we're a voluntary association of 203 independent schools throughout New York State and beyond, as you see on the left side of your screen, serving about 80,000 students. Now, I offer this information because 85 schools from both New York State and surrounding areas will be at the job fair on Saturday, March 4th. And in advance of that, it would be important for you to visit the NYSAIS website, familiarize yourself with the kinds of schools that are our member schools, and understand who they are, what kinds of religious affiliations. Are they a day school, a boarding school? The number of students, how many divisions, what does the leadership structure look like? Familiarize yourself with the board of trustees, et cetera, et cetera. Not for specifics, but just a general understanding of who are the NYSAIS schools that will be in attendance. If you pre-register for the NYSAIS Job Fair, you will receive about a week in advance an overview of the schools that will be in attendance. You will not receive any positions that will be posted. Those you need to go to the NYSAIS website specifically and or the schools themselves to see what positions they anticipate being vacant before, on the day of the fair, and after. If you attend the job fair in person, which I hope you all will, you will also receive a folder on the day of with an overview of the schools in the form of a school directory, which will give you all of the information that you will need to assist you after the job fair. This particular screen helps you to understand a little more about NYSAIS and encourages you to do some research now on the NYSAIS website and specifically on different school websites. So that's why I say know your audience, and you can start that research process now. Let's talk about the resume. So what exactly is a resume? A resume gives employers a very quick preview of the potential candidate pool. An employer puts out a job description, is looking for a teacher, an accountant, a psychologist, someone in marketing and development, someone in admissions, a history teacher, an English teacher, etc. All of a sudden, they put out that call and people start to submit both a resume and a cover letter in application for that position. That resume gives you the opportunity to display your qualifications in a concise format. A resume is a well-written, well-thought-out document along with a relevant and personal cover letter to the position and the school that gives you an opportunity to distinguish yourself and ideally secure an interview, which is the next step in the process. Throughout this presentation, as I mentioned earlier, you'll see specific examples from candidate resumes to give you an idea of what is meant by the particular examples or suggestions that I am bringing up. Sometimes people will say, well, what's the difference between a resume and a CV or a curriculum vitae? Ideally, a resume is about 1 to 2 pages. It is a document that summarizes your professional experience, your educational background, and your selected accomplishments. A CV outlines the full history of your career and is mainly used in academia, in other words, higher ed or colleges, universities, for research positions, and occasionally for leadership roles within independent schools. There really is no limit to the length of a CV. Now, one tip, whether you are applying for a teaching position or a position in one of the other kinds of offices or in the operations side of a school, etc., I always advise anyone as a good life tip to keep a running document of all of your professional experiences, accomplishments, any conferences you've presented and attended, publications that feature your intellectual work, any awards that you've received throughout your career, etc. Keep a running document of all of that information, because I promise you it is much easier to update periodically your resume based on this information than try to remember everything over a long stretch of time. It is a time saver, and it's pretty incredible for you to be able to periodically sit and reflect on your professional journey and what are the specific moments that have led to where you are at this moment. There is no such thing as one resume. You may be applying for different positions, and depending on how much experience you have, you may need to have multiple resumes for different positions, and that's okay. Just make sure that you keep track of the different positions. There may be a teaching resume, there may be a coaching resume, there may be a resume that speaks to your leadership experience. Regardless of how many different kinds of resumes, there are some key components to a resume. And the first is that the contact information is clear, and that means your name and a professional email address and phone number. It's no longer necessary to include a mailing address because, quite frankly, most communication is via email or phone. We always suggest that your format is sent electronically when requested. And please be careful because positions will tell you exactly how they want information sent to them. And it's typically best to send all of the documentation that you are sending, cover letter and resume, in the form of a PDF. A PDF allows any document that you send to a prospective employer to be seen in the ways in which you want that format to appear. You've seen that sometimes you send something in Microsoft Word or some other word processing program, and there's movement, and you spend so much time on section breaks, and all of a sudden it reads funny. Protect your document, protect the breadth and depth of your experience, and ensure that it appears the way it's meant to be simply by sending it as a PDF. We don't think it's necessary to include a picture of yourself. Now, you may be wondering why. It is important to note that bias plays a role throughout the hiring process. It plays a role at the person who's receiving, the committee that is assembled, etc. It is really important to try and mitigate as much of the conscious and unconscious bias ahead of time. That's one of the reasons why we don't encourage you to use a mailing address. It's not necessary, and you don't want anyone wondering if you live in another borough, for instance, or if you live in Long Island and you're looking for a position in Nassau and you live in Suffolk. You don't want someone to think, oh, they're going to be really late. That level of bias plays a role in how people read and engage with the breadth and depth of your professional experience. So let's mitigate the bias and not have it be part of the process. And one way is to remove an address, and another is to remove a picture of yourself. I also think it's important, if you have a multi-page resume, to make sure that your last name and a page number is included, so that if it is printed and distributed to different people, your resume stays together. And of course, there's no need to put references available upon request. It's a given. If they would like references, they will certainly request them. Make sure that when you put references together, you always have a previous supervisor. Make sure that you have this document laid out very clearly with their contact email and phone number. And if it's always important to say previous supervisor, peer, colleague, direct report, and just indicate. Those are some helpful ways that the person who's going to be following up will be able to know exactly who they're calling and what is your relation to them and them to you. So there are some standard or usual sections of a resume: education and relevant certifications, any experience, and I've mentioned teaching, leadership experience as two potential sections. There could also be coaching experience, volunteer experience, and other sections. So you'll see that if you aren't sure if your resume is really well laid out, if it's a good format, if it's got, relevant information, good sections, one of the things that I'll say is, if you're currently on a college campus, please visit your career services office. They can be so incredibly helpful. If you have already left a college campus and you're interested in getting some additional support, call your alma mater and see. I know many college offices will certainly support alums with this particular process. And when all else fails, you can certainly do research online to see sample resumes. There's some really, really good examples out there that could be helpful. And, certainly if you're interested in getting any feedback from me as the job fair administrator, before you pre-register, please send an email with your resume so that I can provide you any kinds of suggestions regarding your resume, the content, the format, etc. And I say before you pre-register, one of the components of pre-registering for the job fair requires you to upload a resume. And if that is not your final version of the resume, then you will be stuck in this endless, I have to update. My suggestion is You set your calendar reminder to within 10 days of the job fair itself, which is on Saturday, March 4th. You set your calendar update, and then you get lots of people to take a look at it. You make any tweaks and suggestions, and then you pre-register with a PDF version of your final resume. Just a suggestion. I hope it's helpful, and it's certainly a tip that I've learned through the years. In the education section, and for the next set of slides, we're going to talk about each of the sections. In the education section, you're going to see 3 examples here. We suggest that you indicate educational institutions with the location and major, the degree or degrees that you might have secured, and it is definitely optional to include dates. These 3 examples did. It's certainly possible for you not to include dates. Again, that's one of the examples where we try to mitigate bias, and if that's important to you, then by all means, it is not a requirement. You should list your highest degree first. If you're currently working towards a degree, you can certainly list it, and I would, with something on the side pending May 2023 or expected May 2023 as the graduation date. Certainly include any collegiate internships, awards, or honors, and you'll notice that on the lower left of the screen, this person graduated with a bachelor's in sociology with high honors. And I will say that just under that, if you're an independent school alum, by all means, include it in the resume and refer to it in the cover letter. It is a relevant data point, and someone who is reviewing resumes is going to be particularly interested if you're an alum, because you have a sense of independent schools, the rhythm, the size, the experience, and it's a great opportunity for you, if you move on to the interview round, to be able to talk about your experience and relate it to why you're interested in pursuing employment at this particular school years later. Here, it's important to note that in the experience section, you can certainly list teaching experience if you're pursuing a teaching position. You would list the institution, the location, the dates of employment. Please use really strong verbs that indicate that you've played a role. Remember to balance. If it's a present tense position, use present tense verbs and make sure they all agree. If it's a past tense position, make sure that you're using the right verb tense and that they are also all in agreement. Craft your resume to reflect the kind of role you are seeking. So read several job descriptions to give you an idea. Here are some examples. You'll note that on the one upper example, strategies for students with learning disabilities. Independent schools use particular language. Learning disabilities is one. We don't necessarily, as an independent school community as a whole, talk about special education students necessarily, or students in a special education program. We talk about students with learning disabilities, learning differences. So that would be what we mean by read job descriptions and craft your resume to reflect the role and responsibility that you're applying for and relate it to the experience that you already currently have. Show that you've contributed to the school beyond the classroom. For example, here you have someone who has facilitated the Girls Project, which is a girl-centered empowerment after-school program. Something like this illustrates that you've been part of the community outside of the school day. You've contributed to the learning experience of the students attending this particular program. And this kind of role becomes especially relevant if you're applying to an all-girls school. We always think it's important to avoid using acronyms and abbreviations that are unfamiliar to independent schools like IEP, CC, ESL, etc. Definitely spell things out and then put things in parentheses so that if you're going to continue to refer to your experience with an IEP or CC or ESL, that at least you've spelled it out once in the body of your resume to be helpful to whoever the reader is. Here are some other sections. Other sections to consider: professional development and conferences. This is a great way to illustrate your leadership journey, your teaching journey, your professional journey as a learner and as a leader and as an educator. So I've given some examples taken directly from different resumes. If there's a professional membership, I love when artists or musicians talk about their membership in a particular association. People in the mental health field often have memberships in their associations. People who are, teaching have different memberships that they are a part of, and they choose to highlight it. Certainly, certifications are important. I will say certification is not required at every NYSAIS member school, particularly in middle and upper schools. Certifications tend to be much more important in lower divisions, and that is something that continues to increase over time. If you are certified, whether it's pre-K through 12 or just a smaller set of grades, like the elementary grades, by all means include whatever certification you have. And if you're certified in first aid, if you're certified as a lifeguard, if you're certified in any type of restorative practice work, please include that as well. Always include certifications, even if it's not necessarily required. It's important for us to know all the different ways that you might be a contributing member of a community. Certainly, if there are honors and awards that you've received, if you've been published, certainly include, if it's relevant to education, some sort of hyperlink within the body of your resume. It's always wonderful for people who are curious to read more about the kind of work that you've done. And if you volunteered, especially if it's working with students, lots of people volunteer in houses of worship or youth programs in their local libraries and community groups, etc. Certainly college and university, include that kind of work. It may be a point of contact and connection with someone who's reviewing the resume and may have, if you volunteered at, say, the Girl Scouts, they may have also, or they may have been a Girl Scout, and then it becomes a point of connection and familiarity during a conversation. And that's always a great way to make a connection with a prospective employer. And, relevant skills, think about what's important. So here I've highlighted a variety of different types of skills. One in particular that I want to recognize for people who are interested in the development and advancement field: Razor's Edge and Donor 1 and 2 are specific programs that indicate to the reader that you have working knowledge of very specific programs that are used in order to accomplish the task within a development or advancement office. So those would be some examples of relevant skills and ways in which to highlight them in a particular section of a resume. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about different kinds of roles. So if you are a lower school head teacher and you are looking either to continue and take on, make a switch of a school role, or you're looking to be able to pursue a new opportunity, make sure that as a head teacher or someone aspiring to be a head teacher, that you highlight specific curricula and unique roles that showcase classroom management, curriculum planning, interaction with parents, and community involvement. And you'll see some examples of those here. I cannot stress enough how important it is that if you've been a substitute teacher, be specific about the grades and subjects when listing that information. And you'll see the center example lists all of the schools where this candidate was a substitute teacher. So they have worked at different kinds of schools in different parts of New York. And so it's important for the employer who is reading to understand this person has a variety of experience at different ages, divisions, types of schools, different disciplines, etc. And then in the last example, you'll see how this particular associate teacher, in applying for a head teacher, talked specifically about the role and responsibility that they had leading their own reading group, planning the curriculum, and working directly with parents and report writing, all of which are expectations certainly for a lead or head teacher. If you are a lower school assistant or associate teacher and you have been involved in other parts of the school, like you volunteered in admissions, you've attended an open house, you have participated in some sort of celebratory event, you know, a read along or a read aloud, or, you know, just anything along those lines, make sure that you highlight that information. It demonstrates that you're getting involved in the school, not just during the school day, or not just in the roles that are expected as an assistant, associate, or head teacher, in many different ways. And you'll see some examples of that in the 4 examples that I've highlighted here. I think it's important to always highlight any experience that you have with children. So camp counselor, you'll notice the example at the bottom, summer day camp counselor, they were a head counselor, and that is relevant experience. You might be thinking, that's only 3 months. It's 3 months, and we all know that children do incredible growth over the summer months. And so don't diminish the experience that you have included in your resume, and really outline the ways in which you were an integral member of the summer experience that the campers had in learning about making friends and activities and taking risks and learning new skills, and just all the joy that comes with attending a camp experience. If you were a babysitter, if you've served as a mentor, if you've been a tutor, similarly, all of that is relevant experience that is worth highlighting for a prospective employer. Include any work experience that demonstrates leadership skills. So think about when were you a resident advisor or resident director, an RA or an RD on your college campus? Did you coordinate volunteers? Did you manage anyone? Did you work in retail and served as some sort of a manager? Or I mentioned the Girl Scouts. Were you part of a group where you were a leader of young people? Anything along those lines that demonstrates work experience and leadership skills should also be included. I also want to note that if you see these 4 examples, in particular, the top 3 highlight handwriting without tears, Bridges math curriculum, and the curriculum and Math and Focus Curriculum and Foundations Literacy Program. So these are specific programs that these associate teachers worked with and are familiar with. Also listed there as the responsive classroom, which is another incredible professional development and classroom management skill and tools and training that is critically important and great to highlight, because if the school is working on handwriting, integrates handwriting without tears, or the Bridges math curriculum, or anything else, and you've listed it, it's a great way for the prospective employer to see that you have working experience. And if you're not familiar with any of these, then by all means, use the internet and look up what is meant by responsive classroom, what is meant by handwriting without tears, particularly in the younger elementary or primary grades, to learn more, to become more familiar with, because maybe you do have the experience, it just might be a different program that you might want to highlight on your resume. I have seen many lower school assistant or associate teachers with the right edits to their resume step into a head or lead teacher position. And one of the best ways to make that transition is to always ensure that someone who is in a lead or head teacher position that you trust reviews your resume and gives you constructive feedback. There may be different ways that you can say things, or you can write things, or there may be things that you have forgotten that they remember that you've been involved in that would be really, really important for you to include and not have it be an oversight on your part, which would be unfortunate. So ask them. You never know. People are always willing to support someone in their own growth and development professionally. We've got some opportunities as well that are leadership or administrative positions. And so here are two examples of two different kinds of ways to list this information on a resume. It could be teaching experience and select leadership experience. And what I like about the word select professional development, select leadership experience, select publications, select art installations, is what you're saying is it's partial. There's many more, and it might be a point of inquiry. Tell me more about some of the other work. What didn't you include? What other experience have you had? So select leadership experience saves you space and also is kind of like a teaser to the prospective employer to explore further. In the second example, you'll notice that they put administrative, leadership, management, and supervisory experience. So they took all that is not teaching specific and put it together in a category, and then there are multiples under. This was just a select snapshot for you to see the kinds of things that they included under that title of additional experience that they have in these areas. We know that titles and responsibilities vary widely across different schools. So when you are reviewing a position, read the description very carefully, review the school's website, understand the language that they use. We know that leadership positions, sometimes they're referred to as a head of lower school. It might be a lower school principal or a primary principal or an elementary principal. A department chair, department head, a dean of, a DEI coordinator, a learning specialist, counselors. There's so many different ways that schools refer to different leadership positions. And it's important for you to be able to become even more familiar by visiting the website and reading those job descriptions very carefully. When you divide your experience into leadership and teaching, maybe teaching and coaching, if you're interested in pursuing coaching opportunities, that's certainly something that is always critically important, particularly in schools that continue middle into upper school. That's great if you have coaching experience and you'd like to explore that. Certainly feel free to mention that as an opportunity for you to pursue. And when you when you're reviewing and preparing, consider how your professional development experiences, if you choose to include them, reflect your path to leadership. Have you done professional development that is content specific, that is age specific, that is specific if you're teaching girls and young women, if you're teaching boys and young men, if you're teaching all genders, if you're, are you experienced and able to speak to how you've done work around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. As an educator, have you done training around classroom management? Have you done professional development around your own identity and pedagogy? So consider how your professional development, when highlighted on a resume, really speaks to your path as an educator, and be selective in that process so that it doesn't have to be everything. You should have something about content, something about pedagogy, something about the audience that you're teaching and how to support them, something about how to manage and support teaching and learning, etc. So those are just a few of the suggestions that we have in terms of pursuing leadership positions and how to highlight those components on your resume. Other administrative categories might include the office administrative staff, and we have seen positions at the job fair highlight and seek to fill administrative personnel. Business office or finance department, admissions offices. You might be a human resource professional, and as evidenced here in the example that I've listed, here is someone who is a human resource professional in a school out in New Mexico, a public school, and they've done a very good job of outlining exactly their role, how many people they worked with, how many employees, where was it specifically. They talk about some of the financial responsibilities that they had, the special projects they worked on. It really gives the reader an understanding of the human resources experience that they have in one location and suggests the possibility of being able to transfer those skills to the human resource office that there is currently a position at one of these schools. I also want to indicate that there are advancement or development positions as well. Communications and marketing. If you are someone that is a writer, you're in the advertising publications field, there's lots of transferable skills that you can apply that will allow you to easily transfer over to independent schools. And of course, everyone needs mental health professionals in every field, and certainly schools are absolutely critical in supporting young people, and of course, a nursing staff. Sometimes schools will use agencies for these kinds of roles, agencies or firms. So also be mindful of that. But number one, go to the school websites and see what is posted and what is available. And also go to the NYSAIS job website for all of the potential opportunities that are posted there as well. Some of you might be career changers. That is, you work in higher ed, or you work in the corporate sector or in the nonprofit field, and you're interested in making a transition to independent schools. Well, we are thrilled to hear that. And just as a shameless plug, this Wednesday, February 8th, from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we will be hosting a webinar just designed for you with current career changers who made the transition from whatever field they were in to working within independent schools. So if you can join us live, don't forget to register. If you are unable to join us live, just know it, like all the other webinars, including this one, will be available for you to view at your pleasure. Now, back to career changers. So because you make transition from a variety of different places, I cannot stress enough how important it is for you to keep in mind the transferable skills that you have that will allow you to make a seamless transition. So communication, are you public speaker? Do you have public speaking experience? Have you developed programs, event planning? Have you served in a mentor responsibility? You'll notice that these three examples are three very different examples. The top one very succinctly talks about the work that they did in the fundraising field. Straight, clear, to the point, super helpful, listed multiple places. Instead of doing like 6 or 7 lines, did it in 3, and it was to the point. Well done. The second example in the middle speaks to someone who is currently working at a nonprofit that works with youth, in particular, the intersection of youth, sports, and educational access, which you'll notice by the last bullet point, which talks about SAT prep classes, and the penultimate bullet point talks about Breakthrough New York, which is a fantastic program that really supports young people to gain educational access to independent schools and specialized schools that really support their learning and growth. So that's an example of someone who has made that transition, and there's some really relevant data in there that is helpful for an employer to see. And the last example is someone whose relevant volunteer experience is all about working with children and young people. In particular, you'll notice they were a tutor, they worked in communications and marketing, they volunteered directly in a mentorship, working with high school students. And each one illustrates some skills and program experience and mentoring experience that could be really attractive to a prospective employer. There's also consistency in that this is someone who is interested in contributing to the greater good in their relevant volunteer experience multiple times a week. And that's something that's, really noteworthy. As you will see, some of you will be moving from a public or charter school to independent schools. And one of the things that I will start off by saying is that there is good work to be done at all educational institutions, regardless of whether they are public, nonprofit, parochial, charter, independent schools. So if you're interested in exploring working within an independent school, we're really happy, and this is a great opportunity through this job fair for you to explore and listen to people who have been in the very same predicament as you are at this moment, who have made the successful transition. Again, shameless plug, coming up, not this coming week, but the following week, we will have a moving from, or the successful transition of, from public, parochial, and charter schools to independent schools. Another webinar. If you can join us live, fantastic. If you are unable to, please do not hesitate to come back and view and listen to different people sharing their stories about how they were successfully able to make the transition. We know that roles and titles in public and charter schools may differ greatly than those in independent schools. So it's important to avoid educational jargon like response to intervention or RTI, and instead describe what you did. Instead of IEPs, perhaps consider developed learning plans for students with learning disabilities. Those are skills that speak to your understanding without diminishing that you worked with students who had an IEP, but it explains what you did as opposed to just listing it as educational jargon. We also think, again, I want to highlight, placing your certification, although not required by independent schools, should always be included because it may be relevant and helpful. It may also help to describe the school setting, and here you'll notice there are two parts that I wanted to highlight. The first is we've got Storefront Academy Charter Schools. It's a multi location school, and it tells the reader it's a K through 8th grade charter school in 2 boroughs serving the number of students in an urban setting. And this person happened to have the role of marketing and communications. So easily transferable to any independent school. The skills that are outlined are skills that are necessary. This just happens to be this position. If you're in a teaching position, working with young people is just an incredible opportunity to support their growth and development as a teacher, and their growth and development as learners. And so outlining how you've supported that experience for the young people that you've worked with and taught, indicating where you've been part of an experience, part of a classroom experience, part of an assembly program, part of a trip experience. You've taken kids exposed, used New York City or New York State or, the country or the world as part of the classroom. All of that is important information to include. Did you take students advocating or lobbying? All of that. Absolutely relevant. And we hope that you include that, or at least have an opportunity, should it become available, to be able to speak to it at some point during your process. Now, I'm nearing the end of my time with you, and I hope that if you have questions and you're watching this live, that you will begin, if you haven't already, to put questions in the chat for me to address, which I'm happy to. Just a quick summary. Please, 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 let's talk about what not to do in a very quick summary. So, unprofessional email addresses should be avoided at all cost. In 2023, you can have your junk email, which, you know, all the telemarketers can send you all sorts of spam. You can have your personal email that you connect with people that are important, and you can have your email address where you are very comfortable giving out that information to prospective employers. Unprofessional email addresses are email addresses that are very, very hard to know who you're emailing. So there should be some element of your name, and avoid things like I'm a stud muffin, or I am too cute, or, you know, Scorpios rule, or anything along those lines that might be appropriate for your personal contacts, not necessarily for the professional contacts. So at all costs, please avoid those unprofessional email addresses, particularly in a day and age where email addresses don't cost anything to create. If you are going to put connections or links to your social media presence, please consider whether your social media is appropriate. If it's a personal social media page, I would suggest you make it private. I cannot stress that enough. Make your social media pages private. Exercise tremendous discernment in this day and age. It is really important that you are in the public space and that there is complimentary information about you, about your viewpoints, etc., and that there is no reason to disinvite you or not consider you for some sort of potential interview and moving forward. We've already talked about there's no need for photograph or you know, descriptions. Talked about the abbreviations and avoiding the jargon. Oops, sorry about that. And remember that layouts that integrate hard to read fonts or excessive color or too many columns, anything that makes it really hard to read should be avoided at all costs, including those really weird, awkward page breaks that happen sort of in the middle of a section. Figure out how to make it so that the resume itself really speaks professionally to who you are in whatever role you are pursuing, and that sets you in the best possible light. And if any of you have professional portfolios or professional networking platforms that you are interested in including in hyperlinks within your resume, if you're comfortable providing that information, then by all means, great. If you aren't sure, before you submit that resume, make sure that you take a look at your personal pages and perhaps ask someone else that you trust who has a good discerning eye to also take a look. It's just advice. All of it, any and all of this is just advice that we are providing. It is at the end of the day up to you to decide if you will accept and adopt or not, and that's totally fine. Here are some things that we do think could be really, really key and critical. If you can, please keep your resume to 1 to 2 pages in some sort of professional font. Those are 2 examples. There are quite a few. Fonts are really great ways to distinguish and, you know, italics, bold, just the formatting and style is great. Just don't overdo it. Make it as clear and as possible. Those easy readable font sizes. As we said, please make sure you include your email and phone number. Now, some of you may be wondering, but of course I would include my email and phone number and your name. It is listed as a reminder because there have been times where someone will register for the job fair and they will submit a resume and they will forget to include either their name or their email or their phone number. And if I am able to catch it, then I'll follow up and make sure that it is included in the future. But if I'm not, then unfortunately, that is a resume that gets uploaded to our candidate database, and prospective employers take a look, and it may be a missed opportunity because they can't reach you or they don't know who you are. Please make sure that education and experience are the most important section. So take a moment and really highlight the breadth and depth of your professional experience. And as I said, proofread and have others proofread as well. Don't forget to always send your resume and a cover letter and any other document in a PDF format so that the way you intend for it to be seen is the way that it comes across. And I also want to say, if an employer says that they would like you to apply through a portal, and there's lots of our schools use portals, follow the instructions. If they say, please do not contact anyone at the school, it doesn't matter if you're an alum and you know somebody. Respect what they're asking for and follow what they are saying, because it's all a part of the hiring process. So please remember, if you're using an employee portal, follow what they say. If they say all the documents in one PDF format, then send it in one PDF. If they say send each one separate, then send each one separate. And anything along those lines, any other additional questions that you may have, if I can certainly answer those questions, of course, I hope to. I want to pause and recognize, before we look at questions, I want to pause and recognize Interschool Faculty Diversity Search, and their information is listed on just above the green pre-register. Interschool Faculty Diversity Search have been tremendous partners with the NYSAIS Job Fair, and they work very closely with candidates. They will be at the March 4th Job Fair event, and they work with candidates and with schools to really support finding that connection and that value add for candidates and schools. Much of the content for today, I was able to draw from previous presentations that they've done from their website and from years of knowing the good work of Interschool Faculty Diversity Search. So I want to say thank you and acknowledge the entire FDS team. And lastly, here you have the information about the job fair. We do welcome everyone to attend the job fair, and it is specifically designed to increase the number of teachers and administrators of color within our schools. College seniors, anyone who's changing careers, transitioning from higher ed, and all the other kinds of schools are all welcome. I've integrated teaching and administrative positions in this presentation, and of course, no prior teaching experience or school experience is required. We do offer these webinars as a way to help you prepare for the event, whether you see them live or you view them at your leisure. And if you ever have questions, the email address is at the very top, jobfair@nysais.org, and those emails will come directly to me. I'm going to pause sharing my screen and come back. And I see there are no questions. I'm going to invite, are there any questions? I hope it was thorough. I hope it was helpful. I hope it answered and anticipated your questions. And if something comes up in the next few weeks, we are T-minus 1 month from the job fair. I know that looking for a job is a job in itself, and I can promise you that there are many, many people, including myself and my colleague Andrew, everyone at NYSAIS, everyone at Interschool Faculty Diversity Search, who are committed to supporting you in this process. And so if there are no questions, going once, going twice. If you think of a question, please don't hesitate to email. I have plenty of desire to connect with you and speak and help and support you. Don't forget, pre-register when your resume is ready. And of course, just know that we look forward to seeing you in person on Saturday, March 4th at Columbia Grammar and Preparatory School from 10 to 1:30. Don't forget to tune in to the other webinars that we have available. One that's going to be really important is talking about the process of applying and specifically what to expect on the day of the fair and thereafter. So that's going to be another really good webinar. And there are quite a few that are going to be relevant depending on what predicaments you're in. So we're here to help support and prepare to help you ensure that you secure your position that you desire. So with that, I will say thank you to my colleague Andrew and all of my colleagues at NYSAIS and at Faculty Diversity Search. Thank you all for joining us live. And for those of you that have watched this webinar in the comfort of your own space, thanks. And we look forward to seeing you sometime soon. Have a good evening.